This video is sponsored by Frank Oma and Galloway Porter something Antique Shop. Both of those organizations and companies have been out of business for well over a decade. But thank you for supporting my craft. That is a real coffee mug. Alright guys, we're going to take just a minute to start a handle shaping project. So I've got the knife built up. I'm going to take it and show you guys kind of the process that I do in shaping up the handle. But let's get started. I've had the knife sitting over here clamped up overnight, and it's been probably almost 24 hours, a little less, maybe 20 hours. And I have it over here under a work light that gets pretty hot because it's actually kind of chilly in my shop right now. It's in the, in the winter time. So wanted to give it plenty of an opportunity to cure. And this is warm. It's not hot, but it's definitely warm enough that I know that the epoxy has cured. And when I put my fingernail in there to push on the epoxy, it's hard. It's not soft. Sometimes, the epoxy can be kind of gooey and it's not done yet. So with that said, this is what I'm going to do in shaping this handle. I'm going to take it over to my little 4x, I think 36, and shape in this handle. And I'll walk you kind of through that process the way that I do it, including the hand sanding. This little 4x36 belt sander is what I use to rough in the shape of the handle. It's a 60 grit belt. After I'm done with that, I will go to the vise and finish it by hand. But this is what I start with to remove the local material and get my rough shape in. So it's noisy, kind of worn out. Got this from my dad, but I use it all the time. And it got demoted to the floor. So when the weather is nice, a lot of times I'll actually take it outside and just put it on the ground outside. So let me get some vacuuming action hooked up. So my first stop, I would generally keep going if I wasn't filming this, but my first objective is to just get both sides flat and make sure that I've actually got a good flat surface on both sides. So the pins are down, and in this instance I'm using two different woods that have been glued together. And so I just want to make sure that all that's flat. So that's my first step, and then I look at it and say, okay, what did it take to get to this point? Did it take a lot of material removal? So now that I've got a big difference between my scale thickness, so I'm gonna grab some calipers and look at that, and then I'm gonna go from there, because I may need to true these both up and just take a little more off one side than the other. So once I get all of that good, then I am ready to start putting a gentle taper on this, and then also start to round out the sides. Actually, the whole profile will be ground in, and then I'll start to roll it a little bit to get the sides nice and rounded. So that's the next step, grabbing some calipers, and then after that, once everything's flat, rough profile, taper it, round it, then do the vise. All right, so got my calipers, start taking a couple measurements, and right there, the very front on that side, 254, measure the very back, 255, so looking pretty good as far as flatness on that one. Get in the front, 252, all the way in the back. Now that's 281. So I know that it's a little bit thicker on the back on this one, so I'm gonna spend a little bit more time trying to get this a little closer to this thickness. But overall, this looks pretty good. Yeah, 253 in the front there, and it's just a little thicker in the very back. Try to measure in the middle, 273. So about 15 thou taper from the very front to the middle, and then looks like another 10 or so once I get from the middle to the back. So I'll true all that up, and then I'll be ready to go rough around the edges, and then start to taper it a little bit, and then roll the sides. That's the plan. Looking good. All right, so here's where I am right now, and it looks pretty good. I've got the spine and the back of the handle profiled in pretty well, and I'm going to need to start tapering it next. But as you can see, I have to put it on the small wheel, so I've got to put it on the 2x72 to get in here where this little finger recess is, because this radius is way too big. And so I got to do that as well. So on the 2x72, I'll finish this radius in here with the small wheel, the same small wheel that I'll use to finish this right here. But while I'm already right here on this grinder, or on this sander, I am gonna put my tapers in, and I'm going to start to roll it over and round it. So that's what I'll do next. I really like how this knife is turning out. Kind of my thing is mixing woods. I really like to do that. I'm not saying I'm the only one who does that, but it's definitely what I enjoy doing in my builds. So this is a maple mixed with walnut, and this maple is just so beautiful. You know, it's not an exotic maple or anything, but it's just so pretty. Look at the grain as it wraps in. I love that. It's kind of a darker grain that just wraps in right to the front of the knife. I love that. And then if you look straight down the knife, you can see how the grain comes together on either side of the knife. And I just think that that really looks nice. Also, I think the grain of the maple is very pretty as well, as you can see it coming around the butt of the knife. And so I matched these sets because I cut them out of the same piece of wood. So that's why the grain structure looks the same, and it's coming to a point, as you can see on the front. So anyways, this thing's looking good. Really happy with it. I think it's a little chubby right now. So I might just take just a little bit more off the thickness, but I am really ready to hit it with the 2x72 with the small wheel to cut in this little finger notch right here, and then start finishing at really just barely anything else left to do on the vise. But I do like to use a small thin piece of sandpaper like this to really help me get my radiuses in on the sides a little bit better. Other than that, this thing is super close to being finished. All right, got to swap out the attachment here to put the small wheel on. This thing is heavy. Beast mode. Oh, I'm a big fan of this aluminum. So much nicer than the steel. Alright, figure out what size wheel. I think it's this wheel right here. That's gonna cut in that radius. I think so. It's a dangerous proposition to put that in there without the belt, because it'll drop right into the bucket of water. One of the weird things is once you swap it out for the small wheel attachment, it wants to track pretty hard to this side, so I spin it a little bit to try to give it some adjustment by hand before I turn it on, because I hate it rubbing against that and wearing out everything. This thing is looking really good. I will do a little bit of hand finishing, definitely. The thing that I don't like about working with these lighter woods like maple and cherry is they get so dirty so easily. And as you can already see on this one, my hands aren't perfectly clean. I've been, changing out tooling and working. And so it starts to get a little dirty. Ugh. And when you're sanding, the metal starts to turn into powder, and that also starts to embed into the light wood. So that's one thing that I really don't like about working with lighter woods like maple and cherry. But that being said, this little knife fits really well in my hand right now. I'm actually going to wash my hands, get a clean, fresh start. I'm going to try to wipe the knife down a little bit, and then I'm going to clamp it up in the vise and go to work working all of these edges by hand. I've got it cleaned up a little bit. It looks good. Got my hands washed. Hands are clean. I'm going to throw in this little piece of, it's like a felt pad kind of thing, in the vise. Gonna vise up on the knife and then start doing some hand sanding. That's what's next. I'm going to run my little oven here and run my second temper cycle on the knife that's in there. And that's twofold benefit. One, it's tempering the blade. Two, it's keeping me warm while I sand on this. I'm going to mark my sandpaper and cut it in half. So this is 600, 600. This one is 240. So I got my sandpaper marked. 240, 400, 600. Starting with the 240, kind of loosen it up a little bit and start to work. This is where I wish I had some tooling to be able to rotate the knife as I work on it, and I'm going to make some, but for right now it's a lot of clamping on and clamping. So I did 240 on the first side, do 240 on the underside, and I like to do all of one grit before I move to the next one. So this is 240, I'll go 400, and then for this one, I'll probably finish at 600. People wonder why custom knives are kind of expensive. They really take a lot of work. Even a small little knife like this, there's hours and hours of work that goes into them. But you really enjoy it, just making something and seeing it step by step start to shape up and turn into something not only is functional but is beautiful as well. And there's definitely something greatly fulfilling in that, because even though they're a little bit pricey, you can't ask enough money for them to actually really make money off of them for the time that goes into them. Make $1 an hour or something after materials. But I don't think you get into custom knife making really for the money. I'm trying to clean this off a little bit, try to sand through some of that dirty stuff that's there, and I won't be able to get all of it. There's just going to be a little bit there that then I'm going to have to kind of be okay with. But such is life at this stage. I think there's some things that you can probably do to help keep that wood a little cleaner. Do a wash coat of some finish, I think could help. So I look forward to trying some of that in the future as well. Time to move to 400. So I'm doing 400 next. I like to keep my paper tied together. I wrote 400 on it, but then I've got just kind of all of them thrown over here, and I just finish the tear, put the other piece up on top of the oven, and then I can work. And I know that I still have a 600 set over here that I'll do. And I can usually get a little knife like this done with just 2 pieces, one big one torn in half. So this is a 400 grit. I'll do the exact same thing with a 600. All right, time for 600. Time's up. I like to just take a damp cloth and kind of pat it, and that helps the wood grain stand back up. So just kind of clean it off a little bit, but since it's a little bit damp, it'll help that wood grain stand up. And then with a nice sharp 600, just hit it again by hand. Got all the tape off, everything looks good. The only thing is that little bitty ding right here. So, little battle scar from the vise. I'm wondering if I don't just very gently sand that spot and then try to dunk the knife for one little bitty short round of acid etching kind of at an angle and get me kind of a pattern and salvage that little mistake. I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that right now. So I'm going to take a 600 grit piece of sandpaper and just very gently try to knock the edge off of this little guy right here. I don't want to remove a bunch of material all around it. I just want right there. I'm not going to get it flat. It's too deep to get it truly flat. It's going to be in the surface. It's going to be there. But I don't mind a little ding. I just don't want it to be a really sharp edge. So And that's actually pretty nice. So it's got just a little tiny little ding, but it's not super raised up above the surface. So I'm going to give it a little bitty dose of acid and see what happens. This is my little acid tank with ferric chloride and water, and then got my little neutralizing bottle. So I'm just going to hold this up by hand in there and see. So just a little bit past that surface. I'm not going to hold it for a super long time because I don't want a super deep drastic change, but I'm hoping just a minute or so will make that not bright at the tip. Then I moved it up about half an inch and I'm holding it there again. So give it kind of a little bit of a pattern. I don't want this running down the edge of my knife, but this is what I got right now. So I'm gonna rinse that off with my neutralizing mix. Try not to get the handle wet. Otherwise, you gotta start your sanding process back over. All right. I think that'll do it. I think that'll be okay. We'll go dry it off, and we'll give it a once over and see what happens. I think that's gonna work just fine. That little tiny nick doesn't bother me at all. Gives it some character. All right, I'm going to start putting oil on this handle. All right, so what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna hold off on the maker's mark on this one. I'm kind of torn on whether or not I'm actually gonna put it on this knife or not, since I already have the Lewis USA on the one side stamped. And this will probably be the last knife that I send out with that stamp. And it's kind of a small blade and I don't want to clutter it up. So I might do the maker's mark on another knife and show you guys that. However, I'm going to start applying some oil to this handle and finish it out. So that's what we're going to do this time. On this one, I'm going to do some True Oil, and that'll help the maple stay nice and clean and clear. I like using these little clamps to kind of hold my knife while I'm working the handle. All right, we'll let that dry and then we'll put another coat on a little later. Well guys, that's it. that's my simple process. I wanted to show you guys basically what I do to produce a really nice knife handle using pretty simple tools and a pretty simple process. There's guys out there who do a lot more complex, a lot more intricate work than what I just did right there, but you can build a nice handle that looks great and feels great in your hand following that simple process. That is going to get, I think, 2 more coats of oil probably, and then that's really it. There's nothing else to really show you guys. I might buff it, and I might throw some wax on it. But beyond that, that's it. So hopefully that was helpful. If it was, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one. See ya.